Next, I want to introduce you to the Overflow property, and this guy is really cool for controlling content that appears inside an element, like a div, but when that content is larger than the element can contain, how should that element handle the content? Well, this is really what Overflow's all about, so let's go and check this out. First of all, once again, you can see I've pulled my 4 divs all the way back to where we started, and as a matter of fact, over inside my code, I'm actually going to get rid of the bottom 3 divs. Just go ahead and toast those guys. Now, it's inside this first yellow div where you and I need to go and insert some content. Now, the content for your div can either be graphical, it can be text, you could throw in a table, really whatever you want, right? Even a piece of multimedia if you're really adventurous. So all I'm going to do here, just for simplicity's sake, when introducing you to the concept of Overflow, is I'm going to grab a paragraph out of my code here and simply copy this paragraph. And then what I'll do is I'll paste him inside the yellow div, and I'll show you exactly the result that I get. So I have something like this inside the code view. I'm going to save the code, flip back to the browser, and refresh. And a couple of weird things happen. First of all, the content does show up inside the yellow div, which is great. But I have more content than the yellow div can handle. So what happens to that content? Well, as you can see, it spills outside of the div and winds up overlapping on top of other content, and it creates a huge mess, right? So with the overflow property, I can now control how this yellow div is going to handle all this extra content. Let's go and see what we can do here. So I'm going to flip back over to my code, and I'm going to go and throw in my overflow property, just like this, overflow, full colon space. Now, there are 4 values that I want to show you. The first one is actually the default, which is visible. So go ahead and type in visible there, and then save, and then back to your browser and refresh, and nothing changes. So in other words, visible means show the content at all costs, right? Which is the default anyway. So there's the first guy. The second guy would crop the content to the size of the div, and this value is hidden, just like this. So go ahead and save that, and then back to your browser and refresh. And now the content is still there, but it's being clipped, or it's being cropped to the dimensions of the div. Now, a quick example of where I might want to use this, maybe I want to add some graphics into a div, maybe some banner ads. And I want to make sure that those banner ads fit into the provided space precisely. Even if the graphic hasn't been created at the correct size, it's going to be clipped or cropped to the correct size. Pretty cool. So there you go. There's the second value hidden. What else can we do? Well, the next 2 are actually really cool. I'm going to throw in the next value, which is scroll. Go ahead and do the same thing. Save this guy up, back to your browser and refresh. And now what I've done is I've created a scroll box. Check that out. Isn't that cool? Now, maybe in the real world, I want to throw some padding onto this guy a little bit so the text isn't running right up against the edges of the scroll bar there and the edge of the yellow div. But you get the idea. So now I have this scrolling content, which is great for news feeds or updates or maybe upcoming events, things like this, right? But as a matter of fact, if I wanted to create a scroll box, this is not the way that I would do it. What I don't like about this is, you may have caught this, I get a vertical scroll bar, but I also get a horizontal scroll bar even if it's not needed, which to me, from a design point of view, looks a little trashy. So rather than using scroll, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the last value, which is auto. And what auto will do is it will give me horizontal and vertical scroll bars, but only if they're needed. So go ahead and refresh, and now what happens is I still have my vertical scroll bar, but the horizontal scroll bar on the bottom is gone, right? Which, again, to me looks much cleaner. So there you go. There's your overflow property with your smattering of values that you can mess around with. Of course, at any time, I can come back to my code and I go, that scroll box is pretty tiny. Let's make them a little bit larger. Let's make them 300 pixels in width by 500 pixels in height, maybe something like that. Save and then refresh the browser. And now I have something much larger. But of course, the content is now being accommodated inside the yellow div. So the scroll bar disappears. If I flip back over here, unless I wind up throwing more content into the div, something like this. There we go. Save it up and refresh. And now I have this massive scrolling box over on the left-hand side of my page.